Hello fellow poker players, this once again is Hasenbraten for PokerStrategy.com. I am today making a video of 4 tables, no limit $10 on the Party Poker networks. As you can see, I am not using Poker Tracker or Poker Ace in this video because you don't need it on those limits, and it's more or less for the beginners in between you and not for the more advanced people. And I don't think many poker players on no limit $10 do use Poker Tracker or Poker Ace. And this video is kind of special one, because in this video, well, it's not too special, but it's kind of special, because in this video I decided not to play by starting hands chart, but to explain every single difference between my play and the starting hands chart, so you might get a slightly better feeling for what for the situations in which you can differ from the starting hands chart, and for the situations in which you certainly don't, in which you certainly shouldn't differ from the starting hands chart. So this being enough for an introduction, I'm gonna start right now, and of course stop if you have something interesting. Queen Jack suited lower right here, for example. The starting hands chart tells us here to raise first in, and that's just what I'm going to do. Against the short stack, I really like stealing, because you very often get the blinds if they stay with their strategy, as long as they like ever played it. And one thing, I made a small mistake here. I am usually raising just 3 big blinds against the short stack in the blinds, just because I can steal more than, and it's getting cheaper. Usually short stacks don't call your raise and try to play post flop because of their short stack. They're usually just going all in over your raise, or 3-bet you over your raise. Then you will have to fold most of the time, or they just fold, and you can just invest 3 big blinds there, because I think that their range is not loosening up enough to justify raising 4 instead of 3 big blinds, because they can't really know if I'm raising looser, raising 3 big blinds instead of 4. Anyways, I raised 4 in this situation, and the short stacker immediately folded, which is obviously more or less just what we wanted. With the short stacks, you have to be kind of cautious usually, because if they play by starting hands chart from PokerStrategy.com, and if they stay with this, usually they're really tight. They only play good hands, and you can even like fold ace king to their under the gun raises and something. But if they don't play by starting hands chart, you should play way looser against them than against the PS.com short stacks. You should try to get some reads of them. Even if you don't have Poker Tracker or Poker Ace, you don't really need that. I'm sorry I had to make an unplanned pause in this part, but I don't think it makes here much of a difference. Lower right, I'm sticking with the starting hands chart, playing call 20. He raised 40, so we both have to have more than $8 or more left if I call here. So yeah, I get more than the necessary implied odds. And on this flop, I am usually folding to his continuation bet, because raising from under the gun, his range is possibly kind of tight, and our equity is kind of bad, and we won't get many better hands to fold. The only better hands we can get to fold here, if we continue, are maybe pocket 10s or pocket 9s, and we are ahead of ace king. But that's basically it. If he's, for example, let's see the equity once here. If we take the pocket 5s, some jack 6-4 rainbow flop, we gonna give him a range here. He's certainly raising aces to jacks. Well, a tight range for an under the gun raiser would be like this. Well, our equity here is 38%, so we shouldn't really think of continuing. The thing is, in no limit, you can't always you can't just watch the equity in not all in situations, because the future playability also counts. But in this part, I think we are both gonna be playing our hands kinda stick to the equity. So if he's having ace king, he's not second barreling the turn too often, I think. And if he is having a better hand than mine, then it's usually a strong hand, because he either has top set or an overpair. He's gonna barrel again and we're gonna fold. So much of a difference here. This is against the tight range. Well, let's give him some looser under the gun range. Maybe something like this. Our equity is usually better here because there's also ace queen in it. But as you can see, we still are far behind his range, and he is still continuing some parts where we don't have any equity. And what I wanted to look up is how big is the part of his range continuing. 5.13%. He's maybe raising. He's continuing with 1.8, so you don't even have too much fold equity here, even against the loose range, not considering that you're sometimes still folding the best hand on the turn. He usually does not fold the best hand on the turn. So all in all, it's a clear fold. But if he's checking here, I am usually taking a stab right here, because I think his range is weighting it way towards hands that have actually missed the flop, but usually still have 6 outs against us. So I'm betting right here. Sometimes I'm even getting a better hand to fold, like 9s and 10s, which possibly can play check fold here on the flop. And I think the money I invest on the flop is way better than money invested on the turn or on the river, because since we already have a made hand, usually our equity decreases with further streets. If we have a draw, usually our equity well, not usually, but our equity can just get better. It can't get worse with a draw. If we don't hit, we still have nothing. If we hit, we have something. So that's what I want to say. Our hand can't get worse. And our hand with the pocket fives can't get much better unless we hit one of the two fives remaining in the deck, which I don't have to say is really unlikely. So we take this one out. And upper left, pocket tens. Starting hands chart says raise, and I'm almost certain I shall raise against limpers. Yes, I shall. So here I stick to the starting hands chart raising. Of course, we have a big equity edge against two middle position limpers. We have absolute position, so this is a nice value raise. And well, flop comes not the best one overcard, flush draw, but we still have second pair. I'm certainly making my continuation bet here, because it's standard, because I always bet here. I have a second pair, so he can easily call me with a worse hand, and my playability after checking behind on the flop is kind of terrible. And heads up, I don't leave out continuation bets unless I have a strong read on the opponent. And since I just sat down and played like a few hands, I can't have a read that strong. Well, now this is a bad card actually, because he's sometimes, not very often, but sometimes calling us with an 8 on the flop, which has a speed now 2. He can easily have flush draw and pair combined, so he now has trips, and he just check called the flop with pair and flush draw is also possible. He still can have the king or better, and he's not too likely to call us here on the turn with a flush draw. But I'm still going to bet, because he can, on no limit $10, he can easily just go for a check call again on the turn with a flush draw. If he's check raising here, I have an easy fold. And according to the last situation where I mentioned that my equity with the made hand is better now than later, this applies here too. I don't want to see a spade, which makes well, besides the 8 of spades maybe, but basically I don't want to see 9 cards of spades. I don't want to see 3 additional aces, makes 12. I don't want to see 3 additional queens, makes 15. I don't want to see 3 additional jacks, makes 18 cards I don't want to see on the river. So I prefer betting on the turn and giving up on the river and giving up on the check raise as well, than checking behind and being in a tough decision on the river. Because if the river blanks, we still beat something. We beat jack 10, we beat the flush draw, we beat the 9, and he can lead all of them into us. So betting the turn is superior in this situation, I think. Unfortunately, the river comes one of the worst cards in the world. If he called us like very loose with a gut shot straight draw, he now has a speed like Queen 10, Jack 10, Queen Jack. Flush draw has a speed, King still has a speed, so I'm certainly checking behind if I can. And I'm not calling a bet here because even if he's just betting like $2 or something, or $3 like he's doing, what can I beat? I beat nothing. I beat absolutely nothing that check calls flop and turn. Well, I beat 6-7 and 10-7, but that's basically it. And I don't expect him to have that often enough to call here. So just reload and continue. 5-6 suited out of the cutoff. We have to look up what we're going to do. Depends on action in front of us. We have a few limpers. Starting hands chart says we shall limp, and that's basically what I'm going to do. It just makes sense. It does not make sense to do anything else. So I'm limping behind, trying to see a cheap flop, maybe winning a big part in position. Well, this flop is not the one I was looking for, obviously. And yep, now it's a question if you want to bet here or not. And against 4 opponents, even if the board is kind of dry and we have second pair, I decide not to bet. If the flop was King Jack Deuce and I had Jack 10, I would be betting because it's way less likely that turn and river decreases my equity by far because there are not too many cards that can come to decrease my equity. But in this situation, there are way more cards, basically all turn cards, decrease my equity here by far. So I decide to check behind and give it up. If the turn would be checked through again, I would be betting because I think it's very unlikely somebody is checking a king twice. I would think it's very unlikely somebody's checking a deuce on this turn. And then the hands that beat us are just 6s, 7s, 8s, 9s. Like the bigger pocket pair, which can also easily have bet the flop. So I would be betting in this situation, but yes, if I remember right, the big stack, one of the button is leading into us, so we just fold. And unfortunately, there is not even a showdown. So we can't see if our fold was right or wrong. He might have a flush draw as well, but since he bets the river again against the short stack, I think he's way more likely to have some random kind of hand. So you have to make up what I said. I said it's very unlikely somebody's checking a king or a deuce, a king again on the turn or a deuce on the turn. And I would be betting then. But if somebody's betting here, this does not apply. So if somebody's betting, it is very likely that you are beat. So you should just fold. So just because you might be betting in a situation, because you consider yourself ahead, does not mean that you can call a bet in the same situation. Well, lower right, pocket 6s out of middle position. Starting hands chart says we shall just call or do call 20 if somebody's raising. And I think in this situation, I'm not absolutely sure. Yes, I raised. That is, well, why? Starting hands chart also says we shall raise if we are in late position. And in this situation, we are in MP3, which is one off late position. And I think that my edge as a player and your edge as a player, if you can beat NL10 by an okay win rate too, is too big to just limp here. You don't want to get isolated by the two big stacks behind you. And I think playing pocket 6s out of a raise here is not too bad as well. Pocket deuces, I would be more inclined. I still wouldn't, but I still would not just limp, but I think it would be way less of a mistake to just limp with pocket deuces, because the equity of pocket deuces and the playability of pocket deuces post flop is way worse than pocket 6s. With pocket 6s, you way more often win a pot without a set than with pocket deuces. And we get a cold call by a short stack. This is what happens when you raise such a hand. You sometimes get into bad situations. This one is not even a bad one because we have position, but still not the best one in the world. What I'm doing here is I'm gonna make a small continuation bet and fold to a raise. I think if he's raising, he is either having us beat with a stronger two pair, or he's having a Brazilian of outs. If he's having, like, for example, just to show you this for 1 second, we have queen 9 of clubs and another queen. If we have pocket sixes and if he has ace deuce of clubs, so just the nut flush draw, he's having a flip with just 1 overcard. If he's having like ace king of clubs, he's favorite by far. If he's just having jack 10 off, he's a favorite, because every 9, every jack, every 10, every king, every 8 gives him the best hand, and we don't have a strong redraw. So just to show you this, our equity is really bad, so we're certainly folding even though he might be drawing, and we get kinda okay odds. And he has a tough decision to make, and then just calls. And I'm done with the hand. I'm not trying to push him off here with less than a pot size bet left. I'm just trying to see the showdown by checking down against the busted flush draw, which is no longer busted. And now, like, everything beats me. So I check behind and he has a 9. You might think, well, what a mistake. He might have folded the 9. But I think this is absolutely wrong. If he's calling preflop with king 9 suited, which is stupid, but people do it, and he's then check calling the flop, I don't think he's check folding the turn for less than a pot size bet ever. So betting here would just be spoo in my opinion. And upper left, we just had an ace king, raised it against 2 limpers and got a few folds. And I think now I'm going to just move fast forward because I still have lots of hands left. And already found one, pocket 8s out of UTG position. I am limping here against the full table. Starting hands chart says fold. And, well, the old starting hands chart said call. The new starting hands chart says fold. I am calling here. So I think, first of all, I'm going to explain you the reasoning behind... Wow. Alright, I just saw that everything I said does not apply here because we are not under the gun first in, but with the limper. And, well, starting hand start here still says fold. So behind the limper limping here is really good in my opinion. We have big implied odds against him. There's more dead money in the pot. People are less inclined to raise 2 limpers than 1, so we don't risk to get isolation raised too often. So all that combined makes a limp here better. I'm now talking about the situation we are in his position. We're under the gun +1, and we ask ourselves now, what are we going to do? Shall we raise? Shall we call? Shall we fold? Starting hands chart says fold, and I am calling. Why am I calling? The reasoning behind this is that with argumenting with the old starting hands chart, I would just wanted to show you that it's kind of close, and now I'm trying to explain to you why calling also is okay if you can play your hand out of position. If you are really new to poker, I highly recommend just folding, because in the situation you call and somebody's raising you out of position is really bad for you. The playability is bad, and your position is bad, and your implied odds, you don't know how big they are. But if you get more advanced, if you get more used to out of position play, if your value play with a set gets better, if your play without a set gets better, because pocket 8s are not just there just for set value, you can just limp and try to play the hand from there. Playing call 20 if somebody's raising you, maybe even tighter, and trying to see a flop. So one more difference in my play to the starting hands chart, but I hope you get my point. To make this once again clear, for an absolute beginner, I highly recommend just folding, because it's not easy to play in raised, possibly also in raised pots out of position. But well, on this flop, of course, we just check fold, and I'm pretty certain I check folded the turn again, just because our equity is too bad. 2 overcards, a queen hasn't a queen is very often just check calling here, not betting, so I just check folded here and move forward to the next hand. Here, one really small hand, ace-8 suited out of the small blind. First in starting hands chart says raise, if I get this right. All players folded in front of us, so We are first in, there's a raise entry, so I'm raising. And I just want to make sure that all of you do this without any history, because without any history, a suited ace is strong enough to raise a big blind, even if you don't know him. Of course, if you have to play post-flop, you are out of position, and your hand is not the strongest one, so you might make up some points for folding, but those points only apply if it is really likely that you will have to play post-flop. If your opponent is like folding 93% of his big blinds to steal raise, which some players on this limit easily can do, you don't have the problem of playing out of position too often, so you can easily raise. If your opponent on the other side is really likely to call your pre-flop raise and try to move you post-flop, you can easily cut those hands out of your stealing range from the small blind. You still should steal them from the button, because from the button you have position, and your only disadvantage that makes a fold from the small blind correct is gone, because you then have position. But from the small blind you don't have to raise them if you get moved post-flop too often, or if you feel that your opponent is just calling you and moving you post-flop. The answer for that is not calling pre-flop, moving him back post-flop or whatever. The answer to that is just to let it be. You put yourself against a movie opponent, you put yourself into a bad situation, raising ace-8 suited here pre-flop. And since you have not invested any money voluntarily, you can just fold as well and avoid those situations, besides getting into them and then making possible mistakes. And it just goes right. So long story, short hand, and we proceed to the next hand here. Pocket tens out of late position. Starting hands chart entry says raise if nobody raised and call 20 if somebody raised. And let's see what happens. We have a short stack raising first in out of middle position. In this situation, I am usually 3-betting. I think with pocket tens it is really close, but since there are so many short stacks, like you might remember the one on lower left who just cold called my middle position raise with king 9 suited. There are so many short stacks that don't play by starting hands chart, and if they don't play by, I think even against a shorty playing by a starting hands chart, it is really close with pocket tens here, but a fold I think it still is better. But against a shorty you don't know he's playing by starting hands chart, I'm 3-betting here, because he way too often is just a bad short stack, and we give up a lot of equity, lot of money if we don't 3-bet him here. And of course we get it in. We can't fold now for 65 cents more, so we just have called if he went all in. But since he did not, we just take it down and we go on to the pocket jacks. Out of middle position, starting hands chart entry is obviously the same as it is with pocket tens. So let's see what we're going to do right now. We have a random big stack we don't know anything about, for raising first in from middle position. He's MP1, we are MP3, and he's just raising 3 big blinds, which is more or less the only read I have right now. So the only read I have right now is that he's probably not a short stack strategy, a pokerstrategy.com player, and this might sound a little bit arrogant, but I don't care. Most of the players on the real small stakes on party poker that are not from pokerstrategy.com are bad. Not all of them, of course, and not everybody from Poker Strategy is good, unfortunately. It's my job to change this. But in the average, this is correct. Since he's raising 3 big blinds, which pokerstrategy.com players usually don't, I assume he's not from there. And even against the pokerstrategy.com guy, I would be doing what I did. I 3-bet. Since he just raised 3 big blinds, I am usually 3-betting to like round about 3.5 times what he raised, just because I don't want to give him good odds or implied odds. Neither do I want to invite anybody behind us. So here I'm 3-betting. Well, let's wait. There is a 3-bet. Question is, of course, why am I doing this? We can, of course, just call as well for set value and maybe play or overpair without initiative. But I highly prefer to play against a more defined range post-flop and with initiative, because if he calls our re-raise, I think his range is, of course, way tighter than the range he originally raised with, because nobody calls a re-raise with every hand he's raising first in. But I think the playability of my pocket jacks here with initiative and with my opponent having a tighter range increases a lot. I'm not always looking forward to go broke with pocket jacks here post-flop. But since we have almost $10 behind and just a $2 pot on the flop, this is easily possible because we don't have to bet all streets. And if we get too strong, if we get too much action, we still can fold usually. But 3-betting in the first for narrowing down his range, isolating the raiser, because if we raise here, many people behind us can call with good odds. And for having a better playability post-flop with initiative, I prefer 3-betting here instead of cold calling. Unfortunately, a short stack behind us goes all in. He's usually having a really tight range here, but for 60 more we have, we have 3-15 and we have to call 60 more, so it's like 1 to 5. And we can't fold here ever, because if we knew he just had like aces or kings, I think we have to fold. But, well, even then it's close with 1 to 6. No, we can't fold even then, if I didn't make some mistakes in my calculations. Obviously he has aces, but you can't ever put somebody on a range that contains nothing but aces. You always have to have, you don't always, but very often you also have to put ace king into their ranges. And with a short stack, I always put ace king into their ranges and call with such good odds. Unfortunately, as I said, he has aces. We lose, of course, as we deserve it. So this is not always going right. And lower left, we have pocket fours right now against two big stack limpers. In this situation, starting hands chart obviously says just call. And against two limpers, I think it's close. You might think of isolating them, but I prefer this way more if we have a read. So if you know something about them, maybe like they're really tight tags and blah blah blah, they fold a lot pre-flop, they fold a lot post-flop, we have position, we have initiative, so we take down the pot way more often than without a raise. And yes, this would be reasoning, but since we don't know anything about them, we can just limp behind as well. So here I stick to the starting hands chart as well. Against one limper, I would be way more inclined to isolation raise him. And on such a flop against three opponents, I'm not playing my pair. I don't think I have the best hand here way too often, and I don't think I will get to showdown too often if I'm ahead. So I just check it down. But well, if it gets checked through once, well, no, they fold. But I just wanted to mention that if it would have gotten checked through here, I would even bet one big blind for value, because I think I have the best hand. Because aces and jacks would usually have bet. The only hand that maybe has a speed and does not bet is the 10. The 7 would bet as well. So if it would have gotten checked through, I would be betting one big blind. But fortunately, I can't. Let's just see the showdown. Somebody's having a jack. So two people have a jack. So my read was kind of incorrect. Of course, against unknowns, you can't always be too sure about such things. And let's go on. Well, I think this hand is like the hand right after the one we just played. Pocket 3 is obviously the same table. And now we have the situation that we have one guy who limped in the last hand with jack 3 suited is limping again. You can, of course, just limp behind and play a small pot, play in position in an unraised pot and just play for set value. But you can also try to isolate him, because he just limped in the last hand with Jack 3 suited. And I really want to play heads up with initiative against this guy. And pocket 3s is really close because the equity is not too good. But with pocket 6s and better, this is in my opinion a clear isolation raise. And even with pocket 3s it can be done. So I'm raising here just because we know that he's bad. And we want to play in position against him. And unfortunately he just mucks his hand. But we still want 2.5 big blind. And now we move on. One more hand. I actually didn't even play, but might be kind of interesting what to do. Pocket jacks out of the big blind. Starting hands chart says raise if there is no raise, and call 20 if somebody's raising. So we now have one limper. One guy raising who is actually on all of my 4 tables, so I assume he is, well, not he doesn't have to be good, but he can very easily be like a sinking player, like tag style maybe from Poker Strategy. He's playing 4 tables, he's raising in marks the correct amount here. So this exceeds for me to assume he's kind of goodish. So I think he's raising here with a range of pocket 10s and ace queen, maybe ace jack kind of hands. And he gets a cold call, so now I would be very inclined to squeeze here, because we can of course just call and play from call 20 rule, but in a 3-way pot completely out of position our playability is really bad if we flop an overpair. So I would decide to 3-bet it here pre-flop, fold if the al-cool guy makes further action, usually go broke against the Malte 1-4 guy because I think he's way more inclined to have crap than a real big hand cold calling here, and folding against the Bush captain as well. But once again in this situation a 3-bet in my opinion makes the playability and our value way better. Unfortunately now we have a raise and a re-raise of a short stack, and in this situation I just fold. Against the short stack, if you know he's kind of badish, you might even think of calling, but the problem is behind you there is the original preflop aggressor, where you don't know whether or not he's having a real big hand or just a big hand. Maybe he has ace queen and folds, but maybe he has pocket queens, doesn't want to fold, and is going broke here for certain, and we have the worst hand, so just folding now is the best play. But, well, if the short stacker would have folded, I just wanted to explain my 3-bet. And the original preflop aggressor is folding. Can't have that much then. And the limp caller, the cold caller is cold calling again with 4-8 suited. So fortunately we folded the best hand here pre-flop, but you never know. You can't know he's having 4-8 suited and the short stack just has ace king. The al-cool guy can as well have kings and the other guy can have aces, the short stack. So shouldn't be too sad about this. And let's see if we have any more hands. I think we do have some, but let's see. Well, I have a few more hands, all on lower right table. We have pocket kings right now. In the small blind, starting hands chart says raise, 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 no matter what happened. And of course, we're getting it in here for 110 big blinds usually. Yes, we have an open raiser. I think he's on no more tables of mine, but he's at least raising like 5 big blinds, which makes me assume he's kind of competent, possibly. This is not a strong read, I don't give too much on this opinion, but, well, I don't think he is, I think he's better than if I would expect him to be if he min-raised. So I'm 3-betting here, I'm 3-betting to 3.5 times what he raised. In this situation, usually out of position you can 3-bet even more, but in this situation, I think we're not deep or something. The pot is already kind of big, so I don't think I have to 3-bet to like $2 or $2.25 or something. I think 175 is completely enough in this situation, and fortunately he just folds. If the limper would have come over the top, I would be going broke against the preflop aggressor. I also would be going broke. In this situation, I don't see a fold because my odds are not too bad for getting it in, and of course with pocket kings you are just behind one hand. And let's continue. I have 2 hands at the same time right now, so I'm first explaining the pocket 8s, lower right, the same table, then moving then moving back, explaining the next hand, then moving forward and explaining the last hand. So now we have pocket 8s on the button. If we get first in, we would be raising. If we had a limper, we would be raising possibly 2. And against a raise from, well, what is he? He's under the gun. He's under the gun. We would usually just cold call. And now we have a really profitable cold call here against three big stacks in position against all of them. So I really like this. Unfortunately, we flopped no set. So I just muck, even though the continuation bet is really small. Our equity is bad, and he is showing a lot of strength here. Well, let's see the next hand. This one isn't too big, but I want to show it. We have a random big stack and a random short stack in the blinds, and we have queen 9 suited. Starting hands chart says fold queen 9 suited, but raise queen 10 suited, and I think queen 9 suited is enough for a raise here. And as I mentioned earlier, we have a small stack in the blinds, and this makes me raise just 3 big blinds, and it perfectly works. And the next hand is king queen suited. Here we are in middle position with king queen suited, and the starting hands chart says we shall fold it here. I am actually raising. The problem there is the starting hands chart has an entry for king queen suited down to jack 10 suited. With jack 10 suited, I would certainly be folding in this spot, but with king queen suited, I think we already can raise. We now are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7-handed, so one more than a short-handed table. On the short-handed table, I'm certainly raising first in king queen suited, as most of the people are. So I think here, with one more guy on the table, I think raising is okay. You don't have to, but it's possible, and since it's a difference from the starting hands chart, I wanted to show. And we even get some hand to play here. Somebody cold calling out of the blinds. I think we have seen him do some stupid stuff so far, so I really am looking forward to stick some money in on this flop, because basically we have 4x, which is beating us. Since he is bad, he can have this, but it's not too likely. He can have a flush draw giving us action, and we have him beat. And he can have a worse king, which is, I think, even more likely than him having a 4, because there are more kings than 4s in his cold calling range. And for both of them, there are 2 out there. And yes, since he's bad, I like sticking money in, and he might even try to bluff us here, so this is a real good flop. And I'm first of all making my continuation bet of more or less 3/4 of the pot. And unfortunately he folds. One more thing to add: if turn and river blank, really blank, like the deuce of spades and the 8 of something, what do we have? Diamonds. The 8 of diamonds comes off. I'm betting flop, turn and river in this spot against such a guy. If the flush draw comes out, I think we just have 2 streets of value, and I like, if flush comes on the turn, he checks again, I'm bet folding, trying to check behind the river. If the flush comes on the river and I bet the turn, which I did, as I explained earlier, I would just check behind on the river then. But unfortunately he just folded, so let's just move forward to the next and last hand. Finally, the rockets. Out of the cutoff, here we are just, of course, just looking forward to stick in as much money as possible. Question is how? Of course we raise and we try to 3-bet every re-raise, to every raise in front of us, and usually also 4-bet pre-flop if we get into the spot. Against one limper we just raise 5 big blinds, of course, and now we get a minimum 3-bet by the short stacker, which if everybody folded, I would just put him all in right here, because if he's min-raising me now, leaving himself like more or less a pot size bet behind, I don't think he's folding ever, and I prefer sticking it in here pre-flop than post-flop, because I don't think he's going broke post-flop with more pocket pairs than pre-flop, but he's of course possibly folding ace-king post-flop, but not pre-flop usually. But now something interesting happens, because the limper is cold calling this 3-bet. Now it's the question what to do. Folding is out of question, of course, so calling or re-raising, and if re-raising, how much? If we call right here, I don't like a call actually, because the pot is already big, of course. We have a $3 pot, and the Milhalo guy just has 740 behind. But the problem is, I don't want to call here and then maybe stick in 74 more big blinds with the worst hand post flop, which I don't know. Since the pot already is kind of big, we already have more than 20 big blinds in there, which is worth it taking it down. I'm 3-betting here to avoid any post flop mistake. You could, in my opinion, you could just call here, because the mistakes you make post flop are not too big, but I usually prefer to just 3-bet in this spot. So cold calling here wouldn't be absolutely wrong, but I prefer a 3-bet, and I'm 3-betting to I'm 3-betting kind of biggish. You don't have to shove right now, but I'm just committing myself. Yes, limp cold caller immediately folds, short stack calls, and we take it down against pocket kings, I think. Yes, against pocket kings, so nothing too interesting in the end, but I just wanted to make sure you all know that you could just call or maybe 3-bet smaller. I'm not absolutely sure if my 3-betting size is correct here. I think you could as well just 3-bet smaller, because the Milhalo guy can't cold call anything more correctly. He's making a mistake anyways. So if you 3-bet it to like $2, short stacker calls and Milhalo guy calls, we get his stack in post flop as well. So maybe 3-betting slightly smaller would be even better. But just 3-betting big, as I did, of course, helps us too. So with those words, I'm gonna close this video. If you have any comments to make, do it in the comment section of the video. I'm of course reading everything there. And I hope you liked it. You enjoyed the time spending with my video. And well, maybe we see each other in a coaching or at the tables. Good luck and goodbye.